Billionaire told pregnant wife to be grateful. Then the mistress opened a letter that changed everything. A gilded mansion, a hollow marriage, and a single letter that shattered the polished veneer of high society. This is the story of Daniel Harrington, the multimillionaire who once stood on top of the world. To outsiders, he was a charismatic deal-maker, a loving husband to the elegant Clara, and a quiet philanthropist whose fortune seemed unstoppable, but behind closed doors, arrogance consumed him. When Clara became pregnant, he demanded she be grateful, dismissing her hopes and fears with cold indifference. The Harrington estate sat on sprawling acres just outside of Charleston, South Carolina, an imposing Georgian-style mansion that had welcomed royalty, famous actors, and politicians through its carved mahogany doors. On a typical day, the house sparkled under the southern sun, the lawns impeccably manicured, the driveway lined with cherry blossom trees. But on this particular morning, the hush that enveloped the estate was akin to that of a funeral. Something unspoken hovered in the hallways. Clara Harrington, a petite woman with a graceful gait, carefully climbed down the sweeping staircase. Her pregnancy bump was only beginning to show, but she already walked with gentle caution. She ran her fingers along the ornate banister. She loved this home, once the sense of security it promised, the possibility of a future filled with warmth. But now, each step downward felt like descending into an abyss of her husband's silent contempt. Daniel Harrington, tall and broad-shouldered, was waiting in the grand foyer. He straightened his charcoal suit jacket, checking his reflection in the massive gilded mirror. With his phone in one hand, he typed a message at lightning speed. The tension in the room was palpable, as though both knew an invisible boundary had been breached. Daniel's eyes briefly flicked toward her. "You're wearing that?" he asked, voice clipped. His gaze fell upon her slightly loose dress, chosen for comfort rather than style. Clara frowned. She had once relished dressing to the nines to complement Daniel's polished image, but now her mind was too filled with anxiety for the life growing inside her to worry about matching her husband's exacting standards. "Yes," she replied softly. "We're going to see Dr. Fowler. I didn't think a runway look was required." He shrugged dismissively. "Fine. Let's just get on with it. My board meeting starts in an hour." The tension between them had started to build months ago, after Clara confided that she was expecting. Initially, Daniel seemed pleased, almost proud, at the prospect of being a father. But as the weeks passed, that enthusiasm dwindled. He grew distant, working later hours, barely speaking during their shared meals. Clara felt him slip further away each day, as though the baby represented something that threatened his carefully curated life rather than something to celebrate. Word around Charleston society was that Daniel Harrington might not be entirely faithful. There had been whispers, hints, insinuations that he spent too many evenings in private clubs or at secluded beach villas, not with his wife, but with a beguiling brunette from Savannah named Angela Miller. Clara had tried to ignore the rumors, hoping they were mere exaggerations. After all, society loved nothing more than tearing down an illustrious couple. But the cracks in her marriage grew wider, and a heavy sense of dread settled in her chest whenever Daniel went on business trips. She knew better than to ask direct questions. Daniel loathed feeling cornered. He paid the mortgage, the staff, the bills, and he never missed an opportunity to remind her of it. Lately, he had become especially cruel in his dismissal, leaving her feeling powerless. Yet Clara reminded herself of one thing: this child was hers to protect, no matter what it took. So, as they walked outside to the waiting limousine, she silently prayed that, for the sake of the little life blossoming inside her, Daniel would one day remember how to be the man she once loved before it was too late. By the time they reached Dr. Fowler's private office, a sophisticated suite on the upper floor of Charleston Memorial Medical Building, Daniel's mood had not improved. Clara tried to focus on the excitement of hearing the baby's heartbeat. She had been carrying so much fear and uncertainty in recent weeks that she clung to any small sign of hope, any reminder that within her lay a reason to keep going. They were greeted by a warm receptionist, Marie, who recognized Clara instantly, though she hesitated when she saw Daniel's stern expression. Clara offered a thin smile. "We have a 10 o'clock appointment with Dr. Fowler." Marie nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Harrington, Dr. Fowler will be right with you. Please make yourselves comfortable." Daniel didn't so much as glance at the luxurious seating area, replete with plush velvet chairs and walls adorned with pastel prints of mother and child silhouettes. Instead, he strode to the far window, phone in hand, tapping away. His presence felt more like a passing storm. For a moment, Clara wished she could simply do this appointment alone. In her daydreams, she imagined a loving husband sitting beside her, holding her hand, asking every question about the baby's well-being. Instead, Daniel's silence reminded her of how alone she truly was. A few minutes later, Dr. Abigail Fowler emerged. She was a tall woman with a warm smile and an air of calm that immediately put Clara at ease. She shook both their hands, though Daniel barely looked up from his phone. Behind Dr. Fowler, the ultrasound technician, Samantha, waited politely. Once in the examination room, Dr. Fowler gestured to the reclining chair. "Clara, let's have you lie down and see how the baby's doing." Clara settled herself onto the chair, heart pounding with anxious anticipation. Samantha prepared the ultrasound machine, squirting a cool gel on Clara's abdomen. The moment the black and white image appeared on the screen, a rhythmic whooshing sound filled the room. Clara felt tears prick her eyes at the sound of the baby's heartbeat. Clara laughed softly, tears threatening to spill over. "It sounds beautiful." She turned to glance at Daniel, hoping to catch a glimmer of that fatherly pride he'd once shown. But Daniel only managed a curt nod before returning his eyes to the phone. "You'll need plenty of rest," Dr. Fowler advised, "and, Mr. Harrington, your support will be crucial in these months." Pregnancy can be stressful, physically and emotionally. Daniel put away his phone just for a moment and forced a polite smile. "Of course, doctor. I'm a busy man, but I'm doing what I can." Clara's heart sank. She could practically feel the lie in the room. She thanked Dr. Fowler and stood, wiping the gel from her belly. Samantha printed out a few ultrasound pictures and handed them to Clara, who held them as though they were precious gems. Daniel murmured something about an urgent phone call as he made his exit. "Doctor." Clara offered a grateful nod. She knew she would have to be strong, possibly stronger than she had ever been in her life. Because as they rode back home in tense silence, with Daniel typing furiously on his phone, Clara sensed that whatever was going on behind his distant gaze was growing larger by the day. The house staff, acutely aware of the tension, kept their distance, as if not to disturb whatever invisible barrier had fallen between husband and wife. "Can't you handle it yourself? That's what I pay you for." Clara paused, heart racing. Whoever Daniel was speaking with seemed to have him agitated. She pressed her ear against the door. "Look, if Angela's making demands, deal with it," Daniel said more quietly. The mention of that name, Angela, made Clara's stomach twist. So the rumors weren't entirely baseless. "Make sure she understands I don't plan on leaving my wife anytime soon. If she has a problem, she knows where the door is." Clara's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't exactly an admission of love for another woman, but it was definitely a confirmation that Angela was more than just a rumor. She considered barging in, confronting him outright. But a fear more profound than her anger stopped her. She still had to think of her unborn child. Caution for now seemed the wisest course. She turned away, tears burning in her eyes. He cleared his throat, as though summoning the right words. "We should talk," he said. His voice lacked its usual commanding presence. Clara shut her book and looked up, heart pounding. "Yes, we should." He paced the room, rubbing the back of his neck. About the baby, I've been busy. It's not that I don't care. Then show me, Clara said softly, her voice trembling. I am alone in this house all day. You hardly speak to me. I'm supposed to be resting and keeping my stress levels down. But how can I when I feel like a prisoner here? Daniel frowned. Don't exaggerate. You've got every comfort money can buy. Most women would be grateful. Those words, be grateful, hit her like a punch to the gut. She stood up, eyes blazing. Grateful for what, Daniel? Your absence? Your dismissiveness? The rumors about your mistress? His face darkened. Watch yourself, Clara. His tone dripped with warning, as though she were crossing a line that would have consequences. Something inside her snapped. I heard you on the phone. Don't lie to me. Don't insult me by pretending I'm a fool. Daniel inhaled sharply. For a moment, she saw a flicker of shame cross his face, but it vanished as soon as it appeared. He simply turned away, walking toward the door. I'm going to bed, he announced flatly. This conversation is over. Clara sank back down into the chair, her heart pounding like a drum. She realized that she was left with unanswered questions and a future that felt more uncertain than ever. As she clutched a hand to her abdomen, she vowed that no matter what, she would not allow Daniel's indifference or Angela's shadow to harm the life she was carrying. If he wouldn't protect their family, then she would have to do it herself. In the weeks that followed, Daniel's aloofness grew more pronounced. Often, he left before dawn for business meetings and returned late into the night, the smell of expensive perfume lingering on his tailored suits. The house staff exchanged sympathetic glances whenever Clara passed by, but no one dared utter a word. The Harringtons were, after all, a powerful family, and gossip within the estate was a surefire way to lose one's job. Clara, determined to keep her spirits up for the baby's sake, spent her days reading parenting books, practicing prenatal yoga, and confiding in her closest friend, Marina Stone. Marina was one of the few people allowed to visit the mansion. Without prior notice, Clara had insisted on it. Tall and confident, with auburn hair that cascaded down her back, Marina exuded a warmth that was a balm to Clara's loneliness. One afternoon they sat together in the sunroom. The glass walls framed a view of the estate's rose garden, where the first buds of spring were opening. Marina noticed the dark circles under Clara's eyes immediately. Clara, you look exhausted, Marina said gently. Clara tried to force a smile. I'm managing. I just wish Daniel would be more present. Marina reached for Clara's hand. You can't force him to be the husband you want him to be, but you can figure out what you're willing to tolerate and what you're not. Clara swallowed hard. She thought of the baby, about being financially dependent, about the judgments of Charleston society should she publicly confront Daniel. I feel trapped, she admitted. I love him, or at least I love the man I thought he was. But everything is different now. Marina nodded sympathetically. Is there anyone in Daniel's life who might speak reason to him? A family member, perhaps? Clara let out a bitter laugh. Daniel's parents had passed away years ago, and his older sister, Patricia Harrington, was even more ruthless in matters of image. If anything, Patricia would likely advise Daniel to hide any scandal to protect the family name, not to mend his marriage. Before they could continue, the butler appeared. Madam, there is someone at the gate asking for you, he said, voice tinged with concern. A Miss Angela Miller. At the mention of that name, Clara froze. Marina's eyes widened. What does she want? The butler shifted uncomfortably. She says it's urgent. Should I send her away? A cold sweat beaded on Clara's forehead. She could scarcely believe that Angela would show up here, on her doorstep, at her own home. Part of her wanted to let the butler turn Angela away, but something deeper, perhaps a desperate need for truth, urged her otherwise. Clara stood, feeling her heart pound in her chest. Let her in. Marina clutched Clara's arm. Are you sure about this? Clara nodded. I need answers. I need to understand exactly what's going on between her and my husband. Moments later, Angela Miller stepped into the sunroom. She was indeed a beguiling brunette, her dark hair styled into cascading waves, her lips painted a bold shade of red. She wore a fitted emerald dress that accentuated her figure, and an air of defiance clung to her like perfume. Her gaze flicked between Clara and Marina. "I'm sorry to barge in," Angela began, her voice wavering slightly, "but I couldn't reach Daniel, and something's happened. I need to talk to you." Clara steadied herself, trying to keep her composure. Her baby fluttered inside her, as though sensing her tension. "What is it that you need to say?" Angela exhaled, stepping closer. "I never intended to come here or get between you and Daniel." Her eyes glistened with tears. "But there are things Daniel hasn't told you, things that could destroy the life you've built. And I can't be silent anymore. My future depends on it too." At that moment, everything seemed to swirl in Clara's mind: anger, fear, confusion, heartbreak. She wondered if learning the truth would free her or break her beyond repair. Either way, she knew there was no going back after this. Silence weighed heavily in the sunroom as Marina discreetly excused herself. Sensing the intensity of the impending conversation, Angela glanced around, appearing both nervous and determined. The quiet tick-tock of a nearby grandfather clock seemed to amplify the tension between the two women. Clara took a seat, feeling her legs threaten to give out beneath her. "All right," she said, forcing a calm she did not feel. "Talk." Angela's hands trembled, and she clasped them together in her lap. "First, I need you to know I'm not here to rub anything in your face. Yes, Daniel and I have been involved, but he always insisted your relationship was essentially over. He made promises to me." Clara's pulse raced. Promises. The thought that Daniel could be weaving a web of lies to her and to this woman simultaneously struck her like an ice-cold slap. "Go on," she managed. Angela took a deep breath. "He told me he was preparing to leave you. He said you were emotionally distant, that he'd tried to make it work, but it was hopeless. He claimed you wanted nothing but his money and prestige, that your marriage was an arrangement of convenience." Clara felt a surge of bitter anger. How dare Daniel paint her as the gold digger when he had been the one throwing wealth around to maintain an appearance? Yet she tried to keep her voice level. "That's not the truth." Angela nodded, shame evident in her eyes. "I see that now. At first, I believed him because I wanted to. I was in love with him, or at least I thought I was. But lately, he's been treating me the same way he treats you, from what I gather. Cold, dismissive, and there's something else." Clara tensed. "What is it?" Angela reached into her purse and withdrew a letter, sealed in an unassuming white envelope. She looked down at it, as though it were a loaded gun. "This letter came to my apartment by courier yesterday. I wasn't supposed to open it. It's addressed to Daniel, but I did, out of curiosity." Angela swallowed hard. "I'll spare you all the legal jargon, but it's from a law firm in Atlanta. It references a trust fund that Daniel set up in his name and in mine." Clara blinked, confusion taking over. "Why would he set up a trust fund in your name?" Angela's eyes brimmed with tears again. "Because I'm pregnant too." Those words hung in the air, slicing through Clara's heart like a knife. Her hand instinctively went to her own belly. She felt a swirl of nausea and fear, as though the world were caving in around her. "How far along?" she whispered, her voice trembling. 2 months, Angela replied, voice quivering. "He promised he'd leave you and marry me so we could raise this child together. But it's clear now he never intended to do that. This trust fund is hush money, or worse. He wants me out of his life. He wants to control me, possibly bribe me to stay silent." Clara closed her eyes for a moment, trying to steady her breathing. Her husband's callous disregard for life, for fidelity, for honesty, felt almost surreal. She recalled his dismissive words, "Be grateful," as though her pregnancy was just a side note in his grand scheme. And all the while, he had been weaving a similar tale for another woman. A mixture of empathy and anger coursed through Clara. She opened her eyes, focusing on Angela. "Why tell me all this?" Angela exhaled a shuddery breath. "Because I'm alone too. Daniel's ignoring my calls, and I can't go to the media, he'd crush me. I hoped maybe you could help me figure out what to do. If we stand together, maybe we can make him take responsibility, or at the very least, protect our children from his manipulations." Clara stared at the letter, her mind racing. If Daniel was setting up clandestine trust funds, who knew what else he might be hiding? In that moment, she saw Angela not just as a threat or a rival, but as another victim of Daniel's insatiable need for control. Their children, innocent lives, were caught in a tangled web of deceit. With trembling hands, Clara accepted the letter from Angela. She glanced at the content, scanning legal phrases that confirmed Angela's story. She felt her voice catch in her throat. "He can't keep doing this. It's not right. But what can we do?" Angela's gaze hardened with resolve. "We stand up to him. We make him realize that these lives, yours, mine, our babies, are not mere pawns in his game." Though Clara felt weak and betrayed, a kernel of defiance sparked in her chest. She had spent too many months feeling powerless, but now she had a reason to fight back. For her own unborn child, for Angela's, and maybe for herself. She carefully set the letter on the glass table. "We'll confront him," she whispered, the words resonating like a vow. "But first, we need to make sure we know what we're dealing with. Because Daniel Harrington doesn't lose easily." That same night, Daniel came home later than usual, a faint swirl of perfume, Angela's brand, still clinging to his suit jacket. He made no apology, offered no explanation. Clara, who had spent the evening strategizing with Angela, felt her pulse thrum with tension. Angela had left, agreeing to let Clara handle Daniel first. But they planned to meet again soon and pool their resources. The idea of forming an alliance with the mistress who once threatened her marriage was a twist Clara never anticipated. Yet their shared predicament transcended jealousy. As Daniel removed his cufflinks, Clara marched into the living room, letter in hand. She turned on the overhead chandelier, flooding the room with a harsh light that left nowhere to hide. "We need to talk," she said, voice sharper than she intended. Daniel glanced at her, seemingly irritated by her tone. "Can it wait until morning? It's been a long day." "Not this time." She thrust the letter toward him. "Read." He frowned, snatching the envelope from her grasp. As he read, his expression darkened. "Where did you get this?" he demanded. "Angela brought it to me," Clara replied, her eyes never leaving his face. She watched for the slightest crack in his composure. "She told me everything." He let the letter fall to his side, face flushed with anger or perhaps panic. "You had no right to open my personal mail," Clara scoffed. "A trust fund for your mistress's child is hardly personal when you're married to me, Daniel. And while we're at it, she says she's pregnant. Is that true?" Daniel stared at her, jaw clenched. "It's complicated." Clara felt her voice tremble with rage and sorrow. "I'm pregnant with your child as well. Did you think you could just keep us both in the dark forever?" He stepped closer, voice low. "That's not what this is about. I was taking care of the situation. I told you I handle things." "You should have stayed out of it." Her cheeks burned with indignation. "So, you wanted me to be grateful for the scraps of your attention while you paid off Angela to keep quiet? How dare you treat people like chess pieces?" Daniel threw the letter onto a nearby table. "You wouldn't understand. Our marriage was never just about love. You enjoyed the lifestyle, the mansion, the social status. Don't pretend you didn't. I made sure you never wanted for anything." Clara's eyes welled with tears, though fury still fueled her. "I wanted a husband who cared, who would be there for me and our child." not a man juggling mistresses and hush-money arrangements. His composure cracked, revealing a flash of raw anger. "Stop making me out to be the monster. We agreed on certain things when we got married: stability, a prosperous future. You knew I would never be that perfect family man. You never complained when it was just business trips and deals. Now you're pregnant, and suddenly you want a fairy tale." Clara stood her ground, though her heart pounded. "I wanted respect. I wanted a partner. If you can't give me that, then maybe we need to rethink this marriage." The words hung in the air, loaded with finality. Daniel grimaced, tossing his jacket onto a chair. For a moment he looked tired, as though the weight of his duplicity had finally become too heavy, but then he regained his icy composure. "You know what happens if you try to leave me, right?" he said quietly. "You have no income of your own. You're pregnant. The courts might grant child support, but you'd never live at this level again. You'd see me win custody battles and come after your reputation. Even your friend Marina can't protect you from that. Charleston society would swallow you alive." Clara flinched at his brutal words, but she refused to cower. She felt the flutter of her baby beneath her ribs, a reminder that she wasn't alone. "I won't stay married to a man who threatens me. I'll find a way." Daniel shook his head, a twisted sneer on his lips. "Be careful, Clara. It's a cold world without my protection. Remember that." Then, without another word, he stormed upstairs, leaving Clara trembling with adrenaline and heartbreak. She realized with frightening clarity that she was dealing with a man who would go to great lengths to preserve his empire. And if she had any hope of protecting herself and her child, she needed more than anger. She needed a plan. Clara woke the next morning with a sense of resolve she hadn't felt in months. She called Marina, updating her on the confrontation and her plan to meet Angela once more. Then she gathered whatever bits of information she could about Daniel's business affairs. If he intended to leverage his wealth and connections against her, she wanted to know the weaknesses in his armor. She dug through old files in Daniel's study, careful to do so when he was out scanning documents that detailed various real estate investments, corporate stakes, and a labyrinthine network of shell companies. The complexity was dizzying, but one name consistently appeared: Harrington Holdings, LLC. It was the umbrella under which Daniel managed most of his assets. Oddly enough, references to this holding company also showed up in old newspaper clippings about an heirloom diamond ring once auctioned at Christie's, proceeds rumored to benefit hush-hush philanthropic endeavors. The more Clara read, the more she realized Daniel's fortune went well beyond the official narrative he presented to the public. In the corner of the study she found a locked cabinet. She hunted for the key, eventually discovering it behind one of Daniel's engraved whiskey glasses on a shelf. Inside were letters, legal contracts, and even more, telling several envelopes marked confidential. Clara's hands shook as she opened them, finding documents that indicated Daniel had transferred large sums of money to an account in the Cayman Islands under the name Am Consulting. Am Angela Miller? She felt her heart hammer in her chest. If Daniel was funneling money offshore to Angela, it might be tied to the trust fund or something even more clandestine. Determined to piece together the puzzle, Clara made copies of everything, careful to replace the originals exactly as she found them. She locked the cabinet back up and put the copied documents in a hidden compartment of her old jewelry box, an heirloom from her late grandmother, Harriet Lawson. There was a time Harriet's name meant something in old Charleston circles, and the memory of that proud lineage bolstered Clara's courage. Later that day, Clara and Angela met in a cozy cafe near the waterfront. It was neutral ground and away from the society circles that frequented the more upscale establishments. They took a corner booth, each wearing large sunglasses, half worried that paparazzi or curious socialites might spot them together. Angela sipped her chamomile tea, looking exhausted. I had a scare this morning. Somebody was following me, I swear. It was a black sedan with tinted windows. When I turned a corner, it vanished. But it felt like a warning. Clara swallowed hard. She had no doubt Daniel would go to extremes to keep them in line, especially if he sensed their alliance. "We need to be careful," she said, voice low. "I found documents in his study that link him to offshore accounts. In your initials, Am Consulting. I think he's hiding money, maybe to avoid legal obligations if this goes public." Angela's eyes widened. "So that's where the trust fund money might be coming from. But how do we use that information?" Clara removed the copies from her purse. "We gather as much proof as we can, and then we decide whether to confront him directly again or go to a lawyer. We might threaten legal action. That could force Daniel to negotiate on our terms." Angela studied the documents, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You're risking a lot by helping me, Clara." Clara's gaze softened. "You and I both got caught in his net of lies. I don't see you as my enemy anymore." Angela reached across the table, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Thank you. If you hadn't taken me seriously, I'd be completely alone." A renewed sense of resolve passed between them. They were no longer just two women torn apart by betrayal. They were unexpected allies standing up to a powerful man who thought he could manipulate them both. Before they parted ways, Angela paused. "I also have some messages from Daniel. Voice recordings on my phone. He threatened me, said if I tried to blackmail him, I'd regret it." Clara's stomach twisted. "Keep them safe, Angela. We might need them." As they left the cafe, each took a separate route home, determined not to be followed. Clara clutched her coat around her bump, feeling the baby's slight movements. A life so fragile, yet so resolute. She had to protect this child, no matter the cost. And with the evidence piling up, she sensed that a showdown with Daniel Harrington was drawing ever closer. One that would either free them all from his grip or destroy them in the process. Back at the mansion, Clara found Daniel's mood improved, which was an unsettling surprise. He greeted her in the foyer with a forced smile and even asked about her doctor's appointment. The sudden shift made her wary. Often, Daniel's friendliness was a tactic, a strategy to lull people into a false sense of security. Over dinner, he elaborated on his new concern for her well-being. "I've been thinking," he said, sprinkling salt over his filet mignon. "You're carrying my air, after all. I should do more to help you feel comfortable." Clara raised an eyebrow, glancing at her own meal, light soup and salad, chosen to soothe the morning sickness that had lingered all day. "That's considerate." He leaned forward, his tone almost gentle. "I've been distant, I know. Work is stressful, and the baby news caught me off guard. But I'm trying to make amends. What if we planned a vacation? A baby moon, perhaps? Someplace relaxing, like Hawaii? You deserve it." The suggestion was so abrupt that Clara almost choked on her lettuce. Daniel rarely proposed vacations. He was too consumed by business. Her mind instantly flashed to the documents hidden away, to Angela's revelations. This had to be another maneuver. "Why now?" she asked, struggling to keep her voice neutral. His smile didn't waver. "Because I realized I don't want resentment to build between us. A child deserves two parents who at least try to make it work." He reached for her hand, though she noticed his grip felt oddly possessive. "Let's put the past behind us and focus on our future." Part of Clara yearned to believe him, to cling to the hope that maybe the man she once loved was returning. But she couldn't ignore the evidence she had gathered, nor the sinking feeling that his abrupt change of heart was a calculated move to keep her under his control. Trying not to tip her hand, she nodded slowly. "A vacation might be nice," she said, "but I need to speak to Dr. Fowler first. Ensure it's okay for me to travel." Daniel appeared pleased, raising his wineglass in a silent toast. "Of course, check with the doctor, whatever you need." As she forced herself through the rest of the meal, Clara sensed that Daniel was testing her. The real question was whether she would submit to his narrative or whether she could outmaneuver him. A few nights later, she found him in his study, flipping through documents. She cleared her throat. "Daniel, about Hawaii. I've decided I'd prefer to stay nearby. Traveling that far while pregnant seems risky." He glanced up. "Fine. How about a weekend at our beach house on Sullivan's Island? That's close enough to Charleston, and you can relax." She nodded, feigning agreement. "That sounds perfect." He smiled, genuinely this time. Or so it seemed. She noticed, however, a fleeting look in his eyes, relief. As though her compliance confirmed his success in reeling her back in, Clara pretended not to notice. In the following days, Daniel made arrangements for their little getaway. Meanwhile, Clara quietly reached out to Angela. She proposed that they use Daniel's brief absence from Charleston to their advantage. Marina, as loyal as ever, agreed to help orchestrate the next step. 2 nights before the planned trip, Clara received a text from Angela. "We've got enough evidence. I've found more. Call me ASAP." Clara's heart pounded. She typed out a quick reply. "We need to move carefully. I'll be in touch." All the while, Daniel continued his charade of being the attentive husband, but Clara knew his kindness was only a veneer. Beneath it, he remained the arrogant puppet master who believed he held all the strings. What he didn't realize was that the puppets Clara, Angela, and the unborn children had begun to cut their ties. And soon he'd be left alone on his stage, unable to control the narrative any longer. The beach house on Sullivan's Island was an architectural marvel, a modern, glass-fronted sanctuary with sweeping views of the Atlantic Ocean. Typically, Clara found solace in the rhythm of the waves, but this time anxiety gnawed at her. She was here to keep up appearances, to pretend everything was fine. In truth, she felt like an undercover agent on a mission to outwit her own husband. Daniel, for his part, was in an unusually buoyant mood. He grilled fresh seafood on the terrace, poured Clara sparkling water in a champagne flute, and even asked about the baby's health. To anyone watching, they would appear like a married couple rekindling their bond. Yet Clara observed every detail, every phone call he made, every text he sent. If he sensed her plan, he gave no sign. They spent 2 days walking along the shore, discussing baby names in a guarded manner. Daniel occasionally pressed her about Angela, but Clara feigned ignorance, claiming she hadn't heard from her and that she wanted to move past that scandal. Each lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but she knew it was necessary. The more relaxed Daniel seemed, the more time she and Angela would have to prepare their next move. On the 3rd morning, Clara woke to find Daniel already up, sitting on the balcony with a steaming mug of coffee. The sky was a soft lavender, the sunrise painting the horizon in pastel hues. She approached him carefully, pressing a hand to her belly as if to anchor her courage. He turned, gesturing for her to join him. "Beautiful morning," he remarked. There was an odd tranquility to his voice. She sat beside him. "It is." He studied her, and she could almost see the gears turning behind his eyes. "Clara, I want you to know I do care about you. I care about our child. Let's put all the anger behind us, shall we?" A part of her wondered if he meant it, or if it was just another tactic. She nodded, offering a small smile. "I want that, too." They were silent for a few moments, listening to the gentle roar of the waves. Then Daniel cleared his throat. "I finalized some changes to my will," he said. "I've decided to leave the majority of my estate to our child should anything happen to me." Her heart skipped a beat. Was this a gesture of genuine goodwill or a manipulative move? He continued, "You'll be well taken care of course." She swallowed, forcing composure. "That's generous," he smiled, leaning in to press a brief kiss on her forehead. It was a gesture so uncharacteristically tender that it nearly disarmed her, but she held firm, reminding herself of the data and documents hidden in her possession. They spent the rest of the morning in a fragile peace, strolling through the dunes. Daniel even took photos of Clara by the water, something he'd seldom done before. Yet, in the back of her mind, a storm brewed, because once they returned to Charleston, the facade would crack. She and Angela had agreed to meet with an attorney who specialized in family law and corporate malfeasance. It was time to gather their evidence. That night, Clara lay awake, the ocean breeze drifting through the open window. She rested her hand on her belly, feeling the baby's gentle movement. "I'm doing this for you," she whispered in the quiet, "so you don't grow up in a home built on deception and fear." In the adjoining room, Daniel slept soundly, or so it seemed. She wondered if guilt or worry ever plagued him. If, in the deep chambers of his mind, he realized how close he was to losing everything, Clara resolved that she would not cave. This was about more than just escaping his shadow. It was about ensuring that their children, hers and Angela's, wouldn't be subjected to the same manipulations. Soon, the tides would shift, and when they did, Daniel Harrington would realize that those he once dismissed and demeaned had, in their unity, become a force strong enough to bring down his mighty empire. They returned to Charleston, the beach trip ending on what Daniel believed to be a triumphant note of reconciliation. The drive back was quiet, punctuated only by mundane pleasantries. Clara kept her eyes on the rolling scenery, bracing herself for the confrontation ahead. The next day, while Daniel was at his office, Clara met Angela at a discreet law firm on the outskirts of the city. The building was unremarkable, a simple brick facade with tinted windows perfect for their need for secrecy. Inside, they were greeted by an associate named Marcus Tyson, a bright-eyed lawyer specializing in both family and corporate law. In a private conference room, Clara and Angela laid out their evidence: the trust fund documents, the offshore account records, copies of suspicious transactions, and voice recordings of Daniel's threats. Marcus listened intently, scribbling notes. "This is extensive," he finally said, leaning back in his chair. If these documents hold up, Daniel Harrington could be facing serious legal and financial repercussions. Angela shifted anxiously. "We're not out for revenge, just for the sake of it. We just want protection financially and legally. He can't be allowed to manipulate us anymore." Marcus nodded. "Understood. We can file a civil suit for breach of marital obligations, as well as potential fraud if he misused funds in your name without consent. Angela, your child also has a claim to financial support. But it's crucial we handle this carefully. Daniel is powerful, and he'll use every resource to fight back." Clara's hand rested protectively over her abdomen. "We're prepared for that. But we need to ensure these children are safe and provided for, and neither of us wants to live under his threats any longer." A glimmer of admiration flickered in Marcus's eyes. "I'll do everything in my power to help you. We need to gather more corroborating evidence, especially regarding the hush money and any intimidation tactics." They left the firm with a renewed sense of purpose. Angela parted ways, heading to her car parked around the corner, while Clara walked a few blocks to hail a taxi. She dialed Marina, explaining what transpired. Marina promised to be on standby for any moral or logistical support they might need. Upon returning to the mansion, Clara found Daniel pacing the living room, a scowl on his face. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice tense with barely concealed anger. She shrugged off her coat, meeting his gaze evenly. "Out, running errands." He studied her, nostrils flaring. "You were at a lawyer's office." Her heart skipped a beat. Had he had her followed? "I don't know what you mean," he advanced, eyes flashing with menace. "Don't lie to me. You think I wouldn't find out? Did you forget who I am? I have contacts everywhere, Clara." She stiffened, a strange calm settling over her. Then you know I'm not hiding anymore. I'm done being your puppet." Daniel sneered. "You think you can just walk away, ruin my name? You and Angela? Do you know how easily I can destroy both of you in court?" Clara's voice trembled slightly, but her resolve held. "Go ahead. We have documents, recordings, proof of your offshore dealings, the trust funds, your threats. Angela and I have secured legal representation. Whatever you plan to do, just know we're not defenseless." For a moment, the color drained from Daniel's face. But then fury replaced shock. He grabbed Clara's arm, squeezing it painfully. "You ungrateful!" Clara winced, but refused to yield. "Let go of me," she hissed. "Think carefully, Daniel. If you harm me, you're harming your child. Everything you've tried to protect, your reputation, your assets, will go up in smoke." He released her arm as though it burned him. His breathing was ragged, eyes wild. "You'll regret this, Clara," he spat. She stood tall, tears pricking her eyes despite her resolve. "No, Daniel. You'll regret underestimating us." Without another word, he stormed out the front door, slamming it so hard the crystal chandelier above the foyer rattled. Clara sank onto a nearby chair, heart thudding, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She knew the battle was fully underway now. There was no turning back. Days melted into a tense standoff. Daniel orchestrated a smear campaign, anonymous social media posts accusing Clara of being unstable, rumored calls to tabloids hinting at infidelity on her part, and even carefully planted gossip at high society events suggesting she was gold-digging and mentally unfit to raise a child. Angela received menacing texts warning her to back down or face consequences. However, the evidence in their possession was potent. Marcus Tyson, their attorney, advised them to wait for Daniel to make a move in court. In the meantime, they filed for protective orders, citing Daniel's threats, along with a request for financial disclosures of Harrington Holdings, LLC. The legal clock started ticking, and Daniel would soon have to respond. One early morning, Clara's phone buzzed. She checked the screen to find a text from Angela, urgent, "Call me." Clara called immediately, panic thrumming in her veins. "He's freezing my accounts," Angela said, voice trembling. "Every credit card he ever gave me is blocked. I can't even pay my rent." Clara felt a surge of outrage. "Marcus said this might happen. He's trying to cut you off to force you to back down." Angela sniffled. "I'm so scared, Clara. I only have a little savings. He thinks if I'm desperate, I'll leave town or give up." Clara placed a comforting hand over her own belly. "Don't give him that power. Marcus will get a court order to restore access or at least secure financial relief for you. In the meantime, you're not alone. Marina and I can help with necessities. We'll figure it out." Angela exhaled shakily. "Thank you." After hanging up, Clara contacted Marina, who agreed to host Angela temporarily. It felt surreal, Clara's friend taking in Daniel's mistress, but desperation made for unexpected alliances. Marina had a guest room, and it would keep Angela safe from intimidation. Or so they hoped. Meanwhile, the Harrington mansion echoed with emptiness. Daniel spent most nights away claiming business trips, but more likely plotting new tactics to break them. Clara steeled herself, taking solace in her growing baby bump and the knowledge that soon she'd be free of his manipulations. One afternoon, as she walked through the rose garden for some fresh air, she found a letter wedged into the gate. Her heart raced. Who would leave a note here, unnoticed by the staff or the security cameras? The envelope was plain, with no return address. She opened it carefully. "Clara, I have powerful friends in the highest circles. You will not win this. Drop the lawsuit, or there will be consequences. I can make you disappear. D.H." Terror coursed through her. This was a direct threat on her life, or so it seemed. She took a steadying breath and photographed the note with her phone, sending it to Marcus, Angela, and Marina. Then she placed it in a sealed plastic bag for evidence. If Daniel was stooping to such blatant intimidation, it meant he was getting desperate. Later that evening, Marina called. "I have some news," she said, excitement tinging her voice. "A journalist friend of mine, Sarah Donovan, is interested in your story. She's seen too many cases of powerful men burying their misdeeds. She might be willing to expose Daniel's schemes on a major platform." Clara hesitated. Going public could be the nuclear option, but maybe that's what it would take to finally corner Daniel. "Let's meet with her, but carefully, in secret." As she ended the call, Clara realized how drastically her life had changed. She was no longer the shy socialite who silently endured her husband's neglect. She was fighting back, forging alliances, gathering evidence, and preparing to expose him if necessary. The final showdown loomed on the horizon. For the sake of her child, she would not let fear dictate her actions anymore. The crescendo came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Dark clouds brooded over Charleston, as though reflecting the storm of emotions that had built to this climax. Clara, Angela, and Marina rendezvoused at a nondescript office building where Sarah Donovan awaited them. The journalist was a sharp-eyed woman with a compassionate demeanor. She listened intently as they laid out every piece of evidence: Daniel's hush money, the secret trust funds, the intimidation, and the threat-laden note. Sarah's brow furrowed deeper with every revelation. "This is explosive," she said. "If I publish this story, Daniel Harrington's entire empire could crumble. Are you prepared for that?" Clara's throat tightened. She thought of the mansion, her once rosy dreams of a perfect family, her child's future. "We're prepared," she said softly, glancing at Angela, who nodded in agreement. "He left us no choice." Sarah tapped her notepad. "I'll need corroboration and documents to prove everything. We'll face legal threats, possibly lawsuits, but if we stand together, truth can prevail." They handed over scanned copies of documents, carefully redacted to protect certain personal details. Angela shared voice recordings of Daniel's calls. Clara shared the menacing letter found in the rose garden. Sarah's eyes gleamed with journalistic fervor. "This could be my biggest story yet, and yours as well." After the meeting, Clara took a separate taxi back to the mansion. She found Daniel waiting for her in the living room, hair disheveled, tie askew. On the coffee table lay an array of legal papers. He looked up, rage etched in every line of his face. "You've gone too far," he growled, slamming a hand on the table. "I just got word from my attorney. You filed for a protective order, and you're working with a journalist?" Clara squared her shoulders, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. "I am. You threatened me, Daniel. I won't be intimidated." He advanced, his voice low and dangerous. "Don't you realize what you're doing? You're tarnishing my name, risking everything. I gave you wealth, status. You gave me neglect and lies." Clara snapped, tears of anger welling in her eyes. "I'm not your property. Angela's not your property. Our children are not bargaining chips." Daniel's fists clenched. "If you go through with this, I'll drag you through a legal hell you can't imagine. You'll be broke, alone." A sudden wave of resolve swept over Clara, buoyed by the memory of Angela's fear, her unborn child's vulnerability. She stood taller, refusing to quiver before his threats. "Better broken free than wealthy and living in fear. I'm done living on your terms." For a moment, it seemed Daniel might lash out physically. But something in Clara's stance must have given him pause. He stepped back, eyes cold as ice. "You'll regret this," he said once more, but there was a tremor in his voice, a hint of uncertainty. Clara watched as he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. She wondered if this would be the last time he walked out of her life, or just another battle in the war he'd declared. Either way, she refused to be coward. She'd shed tears, lost illusions, and sacrificed her peace for the sake of her child's future. She wasn't about to back down now. Within days, Sarah Donovan's investigative piece hit the online news outlets. A headline in bold letters declared, "Charleston millionaire accused of hush money, threats and betrayal, exclusive investigation." The article detailed Daniel Harrington's multiple alleged transgressions, the mistress's pregnancy, the offshore accounts, the threatening letters. It caused a media firestorm, with reporters swarming the gates of the Harrington estate. Daniel retaliated with counter-lawsuits, but the evidence was overwhelming. The social tide began to turn against him, even among Charleston's elite who once idolized him. And, in the midst of the chaos, Clara pressed on with her own legal claims, ensuring that her child and Angela's child would receive the support and security they deserved. In a final blow to his pride, the board of directors at Harrington Holdings called for Daniel's resignation, citing scandal and negative publicity. Shareholders demanded a leadership change to salvage the company's reputation. Daniel Harrington was ousted from his own empire, a staggering fall from grace. Clara, though emotionally exhausted, felt an unshakable sense of relief. The battles ahead finalizing the court proceedings, ensuring the safety and future of her child would still be arduous. But she had reclaimed her power, forging her path forward without the shackles of Daniel's manipulation. Angela, too, found a glimmer of hope. With legal assistance, she secured financial provisions for her unborn child and quietly moved to a nearby city, determined to forge her own future. She and Clara, once pitted against each other, now shared a bond formed in adversity. And so, on one stormy afternoon, the narrative Daniel tried to control for so long unraveled entirely. The letter Angela opened had been the spark, revealing secrets meant to remain hidden. In the end, truth won out. And for Clara Harrington, the price of freedom, steep though it was, proved far more precious than all the wealth her former husband could ever offer. Thank you for watching and listening to the tale of millionaire told pregnant wife to be grateful. Then the mistress opened a letter that changed everything. This story reminds us all that no matter how grand a facade may appear, the truth has a way of revealing itself. Clara's journey shows the power of determination and courage even when facing overwhelming odds. From heartbreak to victory, she found her strength by forging new alliances and standing firm in her convictions. If this story moved you, or if you want more dramatic real-life tales, please consider liking this video, sharing it with your friends, and most importantly, subscribing to the channel. Your support helps bring more eye-opening narratives to light. Let's keep uncovering the hidden truths, celebrating resilience, and reminding ourselves that justice can prevail even against the most daunting of challenges. Thank you, and see you next time.